The Fed has dramatically increased their balance sheet. This has gone far beyond the expectations of any analyst out there, and we have only just begun the new round of monetary madness. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Very simple video to show you what's happening with the Federal Reserve and their balance sheet. As you can see by the title, they are heading towards $6 trillion. I'm going to show you all the details you need to know. This is extremely important because the balance sheet of the Fed is completely and entirely correlated with the performance of the stock market. If the Federal Reserve expands their balance sheet, they can't get people back to work. They can't bring the sun up in the morning, but they can certainly pump up the markets. They don't even have to buy stocks necessarily. They just have to be there to backstop any losses. And this is what they're trying to do in every single category. They are going in and providing liquidity in one way, shape, or form. They went in head first into this, and they have been expanding their balance sheet at a rate we have never before seen in history. I'm going to talk more about the history if I can, but first let's look at the chart. All right, so here we go. We're looking at the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. It is $5.8 trillion plus. They have gone far beyond where the analysts expected them to be. What I'm showing you here is essentially 2019, mid-2019. We saw that the balance sheet was basically going down slowly. As Janet Yellen suggested, it was like watching paint dry. Very boring, very methodical. Then at this point right here, we got to the September timeframe. And this was the introduction of the repo crisis and QE4. They didn't want to call it QE4, you know the whole deal. At this point, they started to expand their balance sheet, and I was tracking it every single day. So we're looking at it from September 17th, specifically when the repo crisis began. Ever since this point, they've been expanding their balance sheet, and it was going higher and higher and higher. And we have seen previously, if we go back, the balance sheet was a max of 4.5 trillion approximately, and they kept it there for a while before this process started to happen where they were bringing it down. At its lowest point, if you look right in this area, it was something like 3.6 or 3.8 trillion. Just in the period of a few weeks, they have expanded at a rate we have never seen before. Bigger than QE1, bigger than QE2, bigger than QE3. But the point is that it's happened in just a few weeks. We have never seen anything like this before in history. Just imagine this. From the point where they started to bring in QE4 up until today, it's only been a few months. They have expanded the balance sheet by $2 trillion. $2 trillion. And much of that has been in the past few weeks. This is beyond anything that any analyst was talking about. If you had looked at it throughout 2019, they never, ever expected this, just like their predictions for the S&P 500 in 2020, just like all that other ridiculous nonsense that we're talking about every single day. Okay, so that's the full context here. Let me show you something else. The numbers that I showed you there are directly from the Fed website, so that's the Federal Reserve's own website, and that does not include April 2nd. So when you add in April 2nd here, we're looking at the addition of another, probably $80 billion, something like this. So the balance sheet is practically at this point nearing $6 trillion. If they continue at this pace, even though they seem to be reducing the amount that they're pumping, we will easily cross the 6 trillion mark the next time I'm able to report this to you. Now, for some people, they don't really care because what's happening here is their 401k has really been decimated in the last little while. Their retirement accounts, pension funds, and so on. All they want is for that to go up because when they retire, they got that piece of pie that they need to start taking from. Each little while, they got to take some of that pie, and hopefully the pie is big enough so that as they're retiring, they're able to buy what they need, they're able to pay their debt, their bills, and so on. If the market comes down, suddenly that pie ain't what it used to be. And can they survive on that? Can they live on that? That's the problem that so many people have, and they haven't even run into this issue in 11 years up until now. So this becomes a big problem for a lot of people. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this particular subject, but it's so important, well beyond beyond what the prices of the shares are and all that. It's really insignificant when you look at it on a longer term basis. What I'm looking at is the pension funds, the 401ks, retirement accounts, and people's general well-being as a result of all this. If stock prices come down significantly, you have companies that lay people off. Happens every single time. Now, historically, if we look at all of the different countries that have printed money, we have seen the United States 2 times in history go into a hyperinflation. Yes, that was a long time ago, but it can happen anywhere. We have more recent examples. If you look at even the devaluation has been so significant in places like Venezuela, Argentina, Turkey. Go back further, you're looking at Zimbabwe, and there's a whole list of them. Every single time they screw something up internally, they break the currency, and you get an heavy inflation or sometimes hyperinflation. Some people believe that if they have debt, well, that's a good thing because their debt will be wiped away by the inflation. Now, if there is some inflation, well, then it's okay. But if the inflation starts to skyrocket, they actually will peg the inflation rate to your debt to ensure that you pay back what you're owed. They will not wipe away your debt. They'll make you pay what you owe because these companies, these institutions, lending agencies, they need to make their profit above all else. If you don't pay back, of course, there's bankruptcy and so on, but that becomes a whole different issue. I just wanted to show you here. You can see it for yourself. You can see it throughout history. I've covered the examples here. I covered them in my books. I know many people know about it, but the general knowledge that's out there isn't aware of this information. Then I wanted to just finish with this one. You've seen it before. I've shown you here. The Fed's balance sheet and their projections from Bank of America on the left-hand side. This is in the billions of dollars. Right-hand side, it's as a percentage of the GDP. You can compare different central banks. For example, the Bank of Japan, where as a percentage of the GDP, it is excessive. And that's simply because they've done so much. They've been buying everything. The last numbers I saw, multiple sources, suggesting 80% of all the ETFs are owned by the Bank of Japan. They print money out of thin air and they buy the ETFs. Stock prices came down. It's actually a losing proposition for them. This is a complete failure. It's a complete failure. They haven't admitted that, of course. But it's the perfect example, not of success, but of failure. Printing money out of thin air does not do anything beneficial for the economy, despite what you've heard from Helicopter Ben Bernanke and his friends, Janet Yellen, Powell, and the bunch. My favorite topic is really to talk about the central banks. As you know, if you've been on this channel for a while, I could talk about it all day long. In fact, if you look really at what has happened throughout history, something that I outlined in my first book, basically every single time there's a crisis, they react in a way that only prolongs the problem. It only makes the economic conditions worse. And I fear that this is happening again, but to an even greater degree this time around. That's all for this video. If you found it informative, hit that thumbs up button. By clicking one button on your screen, you're supporting this channel. Thank you very much. If you want information that is not available here, well, you can get me on Instagram and on Twitter and on basically every other platform. Unique content. Check it out at The Money GPS. Selling stuff online has become a huge deal just over the last month. At this time of this recording, there are approximately 6,000 people in my free e-course. You got guys out there selling their courses for $1,000, $2,000. Most of the time, people don't do anything with the course. They waste the money and they make those guys rich. Well, in my case here, I created it free for my subscribers. No catch. Check it out, theamazongps.com. There's a lot to learn about here in the financial system. Most people, they get sideswiped because they don't know what the heck is going on. If you want to learn it very easily, these 2 books will teach you everything you need to know, top to bottom. Check it out at the link in the description if you want the audiobook instead, themoneygps.com. Hey now, don't go anywhere. Do you have the how-to and the solutions? Well, if you want, you could check out this playlist, hours and hours of content. Click on it. I'll see you there.